The United States is looking to rapidly expand its footprint in the Western Hemisphere by opening up old bases and getting access to new ones, especially in South America, around the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific bodies of water. If you haven't been paying attention to U.S. Southern Command for the last 20 years, you are not alone. SOUTHCOM, as it is more commonly known, has spent most of the post-9/11 era as the Pentagon's forgotten command. It has been underfunded, understaffed, and politically overshadowed by pretty much everything happening in the Middle East and the Pacific. But suddenly, the U.S. military is looking south again. Over the past year, the Pentagon has been negotiating expanded access to airfields, ports, and forward operating sites across Latin America and the Caribbean. Ecuador voted on a national referendum that would have let the U.S. return to a base it lost 15 years ago. Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, is hosting F-35Bs and MQ-9 Reaper drones while an old base is resurrected. The Coast Guard and Navy just surged major counter-narcotics operations across the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. While this is all seemingly directed at drug traffickers, we need to remember that China now has its largest overseas footprint outside the Indo-Pacific right here in the Western Hemisphere. Welcome back to Task and Purpose. I'm Kyle, and today we're going to dig into what the Pentagon is actually doing in Latin America, why this is happening now by examining China and drug gangs, and whether this is a genuine, long-term strategy or just a flash in the pan before we get back to hyperfixating on the Middle East and CENTCOM. But first, a quick word from our friends at Henson Razors. If you've served, you already know that shaving is not optional, especially now. Whether you're in the field, on watch, or halfway through a 12-hour shift, the standard is the same. But here's the problem. The razors that come with that standard have not changed in decades. Most PX shelves are stocked with overpriced, multi-blade cartridges that cause razor burn, ingrowns, and skin irritation. That's not just annoying, it's a readiness issue. Henson Razors are different. Precision machined from aerospace grade aluminum to exacting specifications, they eliminate blade flex and chatter, giving you a clean, consistent shave with less irritation. Clinical studies even show it's better for your skin barrier, and that's critical when you're shaving every single day without fail. This is gear built with the same precision that is demanded out of you every single day. No gimmicks, no waste, just a tool that works. Head to hensonshaving.com/taskandpurpose and use code taskandpurpose at checkout to get 100 free blades with your purchase. Just make sure that when you do, both the razor and the blades are in your cart. And a big thank you to Henson Razors for sponsoring this episode. For most Americans, the last time they heard anything about bases in Latin America was during the fight over the forward operating location in Manta, Ecuador, and even then, maybe not. The U.S. operated surveillance aircraft out of Manta until 2009 when Ecuador's then president, Rafael Correa, shut the base down and amended the constitution to ban foreign militaries entirely. For the Ecuadorian public, the base had become synonymous with American influence at a time when the Iraq War was wildly unpopular. For the Pentagon, losing Manta meant losing one of its best maritime surveillance hubs in the hemisphere. And now, 15 years later, the US wants it back, but Ecuador isn't quite ready. In November of 2025, the Ecuadorian people voted on and rejected a national referendum that would have allowed foreign militaries to operate on its soil again. This wasn't framed as a geopolitical realignment toward Washington, it was framed more as survival. Ecuador has been hit with a wave of cartel violence so severe that international security experts now describe the country as Colombia in the 1990s, but compressed into 5 years. According to Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa, who supported the referendum, 70% of the world's cocaine passes through the country. Prisons are overrun, police chiefs are being assassinated, armed groups have even attacked TV stations live on air. The government declared an internal armed conflict between the government and several organized crime groups. Under those conditions, letting the US help with intelligence, surveillance, and maritime patrol is a lot less controversial, but voters still are not ready. As we recently reported on taskandpurpose.com, Pentagon officials have expressed interest in returning to Manta, not as a giant Cold War-style base, but as an access point for surveillance aircraft, Coast Guard detachments, and joint operations. Just our interest in Ecuador drew fire from Venezuela, which mobilized troops near the border and accused Ecuador of opening the door to U.S. militarization. Right now, it doesn't seem like the U.S. will get its wish to return to Manta, but the fact that we are having the conversation at all tells you just how much the strategic environment has changed, and there is a lot more change ahead, as we will discuss. Though we won't be back in Manta for the foreseeable future, it isn't the only location being reconsidered. The US has been pouring money into refurbishing infrastructure at Roosevelt Roads in Puerto Rico, a former Navy base that was shut down in 2004. Earlier this year, Marine F-35Bs deployed there for counter-drug operations alongside MQ-9 Reaper drones and Coast Guard cutters. Roosevelt Roads was first established in 1943 and was essential in US invasions of the Dominican Republic in 1965, Grenada in 1983, Panama in 1989, and Haiti in 1994. When you say it all together like that, it doesn't sound too great, but anyway. Now, Puerto Rico is a US territory, and it's becoming the anchor for a broader return to the region. That's because Roosevelt Roads gives the Pentagon exactly what SOUTHCOM says it lacks everywhere else: secure infrastructure, modern runways, existing fuel and logistics capacity, and no local political backlash, or at least none that could force the US military out like in Ecuador. And once you look at the pattern, it becomes clear that the Pentagon isn't trying to rebuild old-school permanent bases. It's doing something closer to what it's done in the Philippines: rotational access, pre-positioned equipment, and rapidly deployed infrastructure that can scale up fast in a crisis. Call it the lily pad model if you want. Smaller, cheaper, politically easier, and designed for a world where China is building deep water ports and intelligence sites in your backyard. So let's dive into that mess. Former SOUTHCOM Commander General Laura Richardson, who served in that post between 2021 and 2024, had been testifying about China in this region for years. According to her, China now has its largest overseas presence outside the Indo-Pacific right here in this hemisphere. This includes port construction, telecom networks, satellite tracking stations, and police training programs. Maybe you've heard about the Chinese Space Tracking Station in Neuquén, Argentina. It's a facility built and operated by a Chinese military-linked corporation under a 50-year lease with no meaningful Argentine oversight. When it was built, they promised a visitor center for the 16-story antenna, but now it is surrounded by barbed wire and you can only access it by an appointment, if at all. Some say it does nothing special, others say it can be used to spy on our spy satellites. Then there's the port of Chancay in Peru, a massive Chinese-owned deepwater port that US officials privately warned could serve dual-use functions in a crisis. And China has sold surveillance systems to Ecuador, Bolivia, Brazil, and beyond, technology that often operates on PRC data architecture. That can sometimes, and it often does, mean that there are backdoors built into it that only China can access. To be clear though, China is not building military bases. It's building the kind of infrastructure that make influence durable, like ports, telecom, satellites, and training. And while US officials don't say the quiet part out loud, this could be, and probably should be, the strategic driver behind the Pentagon's renewed interest in regional access. But China is not the only reason we are increasing our presence in the region. So why do we need this access? Well, it's not just geopolitics. The operational demands in the region are real, and they never went away in the first place. We just got distracted with the global war on terror. Well, buckle up everybody, because we're about to get back to the war on drugs, and this time, trust us, it'll be different. About 90% of US-bound cocaine still transits through maritime routes, often through the Eastern Pacific before swinging north towards Central America. Interdiction success rates remain low, not because the Coast Guard or Navy are failing, but because they're massively under-resourced for the size of this mission. In 2023 and 2024, SOUTHCOM's own reporting said it could target only about 15% 15% of known maritime trafficking events due to a lack of aircraft and ships. So when the Pentagon talks about reviving access in the Caribbean and Central and South America, what they're referring to is getting ISR assets into the fight, reduce flight times, and improving the odds of actually catching the smugglers. The Navy has also been rotating littoral combat ships into the region. The Coast Guard deployed multiple fast response cutters to Puerto Rico and Curacao, and in the last 2 years, the U.S. has announced dozens of small boat interdictions. These operations do not require large bases. They require runways, fuel, and a couple of security agreements, and that's exactly what the Pentagon is pursuing, so let's discuss where they're looking to do that. So we're not going to get Manta back, but where else is the US expanding? The New York Times reported that an AC-130 gunship, a P-8 Poseidon, and a C-40 were spotted at Comalapa in El Salvador. This was backed up by satellite imagery with flights apparently beginning in mid-October. Panama is back in play too. While the US hasn't proposed anything like a return to the pre-1999 Canal Zone, American officials have been negotiating expanded access for surveillance flights and maritime patrols. This follows reports that Chinese companies have been acquiring port and logistics contracts linked to the canal. Colombia remains the most reliable US partner in the region. The US already uses Palancaro Air Base under existing agreements, though any further expansion depends on Bogota's politics. The Dominican Republic has held talks with US officials about a joint maritime security center, and US Navy ships have been operating more frequently from Dominican ports. And then there's Guyana, a country with a population smaller than Wyoming but enormous offshore oil reserves. Guyana's border dispute with Venezuela has turned it into a major security flashpoint, and US forces have increased training and visits accordingly. Nobody is calling Guyana a base, but the US military footprint there has grown dramatically. The next question is, what will operate from all these new locations? So what would the US actually do from these revived or expanded access points? First and foremost, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or ISR. MQ-9 Reapers, P-8 Poseidons, Border Patrol Dash 8s, and Marine Unmanned Squadrons for littoral detection. These aircraft are the backbone of counter-drug operations and crisis response. Second, Maritime Interdiction Forces, Coast Guard Fast Response Cutters, Navy helicopters, and occasionally an LCS tasked for Southern Command missions. Third, fighter rotations. F-35Bs have already been used in the region, and Air Force Special Operations aircraft like MC-130s and CV-22s regularly train with partner nations. Fourth, Special Operations Training and Advisory Teams. These are small, quiet, and politically sensitive, but they are essential for helping partner militaries fight cartel-linked armed groups. And finally, engineering and humanitarian forces. The region is hit by hurricanes, earthquakes, and mass migration events fairly regularly. The US relies on forward access points to respond quickly like we did after Hurricane Melissa pounded Jamaica in late October. The 22nd MEU and other US forces in the region responded quickly, and their efforts are still ongoing. All this to say that nothing here looks like the giant bases of the Cold War. This is about access, mobility, short rotations, and flexibility. For now, at least, the US doesn't seem intent on maintaining large bases outside of Puerto Rico and Guantanamo Bay. To do that would come with some pretty difficult politics, so let's reluctantly discuss that mess. Even with access agreements, we run into the same predictable political obstacles. Latin American citizens are skeptical of US military involvement. Even governments that want US help have to tiptoe around accusations of militarization. China, meanwhile, often shows up with money and infrastructure deals that are far easier for politicians to sell domestically than military cooperation. When the US arrives offering surveillance flights and small detachments of Marines, Beijing shows up offering highways, power plants, and low-interest loans. And finally, the elephant in the room, the US has not been consistent. SOUTHCOM is the lowest funded Pentagon command, at least for now, and every military leader assigned to it knows that they're only going to be there for about 3 years. Congress just rarely treats the Western Hemisphere as a strategic priority. Just look at the pattern. SOUTHCOM commanders testify every year that they don't have enough ships, aircraft, or personnel. They warn about China, criminal networks, migration, instability, and yet the funding never meaningfully changes. China really is playing a long game, drug trafficking isn't slowing down, Venezuelan instability is rising, and the US has realized that you can't posture globally if your own hemisphere is wide open. The US is not building giant permanent bases again, it's reactivating infrastructure, pursuing small access agreements, and positioning itself to respond quickly in a region that's become strategically relevant for the first time in a generation. Whether this actually works, whether the US ends up with a resilient network of lily pad bases across the region, depends on three things: local politics, US funding, and whether Washington can stick with a Western Hemisphere strategy longer than a single 3-year commander tour, or carry this into the next presidential administration, whatever that's going to look like. If it can actually stick to this, then what you're seeing now could be the beginning of a quiet but significant shift back toward this region. If not, this might go down as just another moment where SOUTHCOM made a lot of noise, the Pentagon nodded politely, and then everyone moved on. I wrote this script and Savvy edited the video, and now we've reached the channel update time portion. First, I want to do a quick correction. In the XM30 video, we had some things wrong, and it's my fault because I wrote that script, but a representative from General Dynamics Land Systems reached out and set the record straight. In the video, we said that the Griffin 3 was what they were basing their XM30 submission off of, and that's just not true, they said. They told us that they're going to a clean sheet design. They did acknowledge that naming it their demonstrator from 2018, the Griffin 3, was a little confusing because it has nothing to do with the Griffin 2. They also told us that the MPF, the Mobile Protected Firepower, which became the M10 Booker, that wasn't the Griffin 3 either. That became a clean sheet design somewhere along the way as well. So wanted to get that out there. Got a really nice email from them. It was actually really cool. It's a little embarrassing that I got it wrong, but you know, I do my best. I spent a lot of time researching this stuff. I wasn't the only one who said this. This was said elsewhere. So, but we set the record straight, so please forgive me. Don't be too mean to me in the comments. If you are, I really don't care. Anyways, the past couple videos, I've given out my email, kyle.gunn@taskandpurpose.com, for any service members or really anybody who just finds themselves low over the holidays. I was a young service member before, stuck in the barracks on a holiday with nowhere to go. It sucks. You get lonely, you get sad, you get bored, your mind starts racing. It's okay to feel like that. Just don't let it consume you. Please reach out to me or somebody else if you don't feel comfortable. I'm in the Eastern North Carolina area. If you're around the area and you just need somewhere to go or someone to talk to, let's go out to lunch, let's hang out. I really do want to do this for the community because we have such a great audience here. It's really the least we can do. So shoot me an email if you need to, or if you just want to say, hey, that's all, you know, just what you got to do to take care of yourself, do it. The store, we have a new code called BlockLeave for 20% off at store.taskandpurpose.com. This will run through the end of the year. So if you're watching this after that, you can still use code ActuallyWatch for 10% off. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot. I just want to wish you guys, you know, not wish, but say thank you to everybody for all the support, feedback, criticism, jokes, whatever you've done to support us since I took over in April. I really appreciate it. It's gone very well, all things considered. And I owe you all a lot for that. So sincerely, thank you. I'm Kyle, your friendly ginger producer man. You are all dismissed, and I will see you next time.